Hello, good morning and welcome. My name is Deirdre and this is Daily CBT. So today I am looking at 3 ways that we can control anxiety. And the first one, well, I'll go through the 3 first and then I'll talk a little bit more. So the first one is to recognise anxiety for what it is. Second is to do things differently. And the third is to think things differently. So as always, the core of cognitive behavioural techniques and cognitive behavioural therapy is that there's always another way to think and there's always another way to do. So the first step in recognising it for what it is, so anxiety is a normal reaction to a perceived threat. So if we look at it differently and we look at it from the perspective of a warning that our mind is worried about something. So if, for example, a friend or somebody said to us that they were worried about something, for us they were trying to protect us. So say they were saying, oh, you know, I'm just worried that you're taking on too much, for example. Would you say to that friend, stop talking to me like that, don't talk, I don't want to hear you, you wouldn't listen? Then what would the friend do? Then, you know, they may have to shout louder, they may have to speak louder, they may have to become more persistent in getting the message across. And it is the same with anxiety, where we are, because it feels physically awful to experience anxiety, we tend to just not want to experience it, we tend to push it away, but we then don't listen to what it is that we're worried about. And when we can do that, that comes into doing things differently. Often anxiety is compared to an emergency, so it's something, and Steve Peters talks about the chimp part of the brain where it's, you know, really urgent, that the chimp is jumping up and down, it wants to get its message across to us. So if we then hear the emergency and we go into fight or flight with anxiety, then another thing that we can do is to not treat it like an anxiety, so to act differently than we would do in an emergency. So in an emergency, you wouldn't be breathing calmly, you wouldn't be taking deep breaths, you'd be just here, you'd have those kind of quick breaths to get you to fight or flight. So taking deep breaths when there's an emergency, when anxiety is building, is one of the techniques to do things differently. The other is to smile, and that's difficult when you're having the emergency anxious thoughts, but it does then reset to a calmer, controlled state. And the other one is saliva. So sometimes the mechanism of chewing gum or imagining that you're chewing gum outside, because you wouldn't be chewing gum if it was an emergency, or you wouldn't be chewing, it can help then to get you into different states. So those 3 things, like smiling, breathing, and pretending that you're chewing or actually chewing gum, but you know, whatever works for you, helps to do things differently. Thinking things differently. So kind of coming back to what we said about when we think of a perceived threat, when we're thinking anxious thoughts, if we think of it like a friend giving us a message, then we can think about that from the perspective of, thank you, you know, I hear you, I'm okay, I can deal with this. And then that comes into thinking about things differently from sometimes the cognitive distortions. So we could think of, if we're catastrophizing, thinking it from the perspective of how, you know, what is likely to happen? Am I catastrophizing, or is the imagined threat not as great as I think it is? So those are the 3 techniques today. Thank you for listening to me and have a great day. Bye for now. Speak to you tomorrow.